Are you a person who likes to travel, but some of the restraints of your life kind of hold you back? What I mean by that is maybe you have children at home and you're stuck with having to travel when they're out of school or they're on fall break or spring break. Or maybe you're a school teacher and you've got those same restrictions. Or perhaps you're just in that stage of life where you're having to watch your budget and you only have so much to travel with. And the idea of international travel just isn't going to work for your lifestyle. Well, what I wanted to do is to do a series of video for people who are in that situation. People who are kind of midlife, raising their families, raising their children, but they're value hunters. They want to get good value from their points and be able to enjoy some domestic travel and vacations. Well, that's what this series is all about. So if you would, hit the like and subscribe button and let me kind of lay out the parameters, lay out the basic principles for being able to get great value from a credit card setup, not having to spend a ton on it, and being able to say, you know what? I'm not just wasting my points. I'm doing this at a high level, even though I have some restrictions on my travel in my life. So if you would hit the like and subscribe button, let me tell you all about it. So where this series came from is I've been doing this channel for a few years now, and a lot of my personal travel now in this stage of life, we don't have children at home. We're at the end of our careers. We have very flexible time and we have more resources than we did in the past. At this point in our lives, we pay for a lot of things with cash, save our points for international business and first class, great, fantastic hotels. And so we're enjoying that stage of life and enjoying our points in that way. But I got to reflecting on all the people that type of travel just doesn't apply to. And basically, there are a lot of folks who are like we were, Nona and I, say 15 years ago in our lives, when we were in the midst of raising our kids and we were taking them to school and taking them to ball games and we were having to watch our budget because we had so many extra things we had to pay for all the time. And we didn't have a lot of time to travel because we were stuck with their school schedules and our work schedules. And basically, most of our travel was within the United States. It was domestic. We weren't doing big international trips with our kids. And I thought, I need to make some videos that really would have made a difference to me 15 years ago when we were raising our kids, and hopefully will give some great value for people who are currently in that stage of life with those same parameters, those same restrictions on their travel. And so these are the basic principles that are going to guide me through these upcoming videos, because I still think that even though you can get lots of advice on how to do domestic travel, some of the advice misses some of the realities of what it's like to be in that stage of life. Some of the things that are just basically very core principles about what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, what is too hard, and what would cost too much. Number one is I think that a setup for someone in that stage of life for domestic travel should be relatively simple. Some of the cards that are often recommended to people who are doing domestic travel are anything but simple. For instance, I think the Capital One Venture X is a great card with 2x earnings on everything, easy to get your annual fee back. But they don't have any domestic airline partners. So if you want to book with, say, United or with American or with Delta, then you've got to transfer to a foreign partner, something like Avianca, or you got to transfer to something like Turkish Airlines or Air France. And then you've got to find a way to purchase a ticket on United or American or Delta with a foreign currency. So there's extra steps involved. It's just hard. It can be confusing. Their websites and their apps aren't all that intuitive. It's just tough. So my first basic principle is that I think a setup needs to be simple and easy and not require you to become a points and miles expert, a transfer partner expert in order to get some decent value. The second point that I think is very important as a general rule for what should be the standard in domestic travel for people in that stage of life is that there should be high value domestic transfer partners. Now, what I mean by that is that transfer partners are ones that you can just move your credit card points over to. So you can do that with all four of the major U.S. airlines. You can do it from Chase over to United. You can do it with Chase over to Southwest. You can do it with Citi over to American, and you can do so also with American Express over to Delta. But they're not all high value. And that is a criteria I'm looking for. I want to help you to use points in a way where you get the most value, where you're winning over the bank rather than the bank being happy you're spending on that card and using your points for low value. And the basic standard for me is I want you to get at least 2 cents per point on all of your points. So that's kind of the floor. Now, that's very easy to do with international business and first class flights and some of the highest end hotels in the Maldives or whatever it may be. But it's not easy to do necessarily with all of your domestic travel, but it can be done. But you've got to look for high value different domestic partners. And what I mean by that, even though I think they have a great product, Delta does not fit that bill. It is very difficult to get over 2 cents per point for a Delta redemption. Southwest, you may love Southwest, but they do not fit that bill. You can't hardly do so. The ones that you can are partners like American, very easy. Alaska, very easy to get high value. And sometimes with United. So I would include them in this list as well. But pretty much those are the 3 domestic partners. Now, you can use the others, Southwest if you want. You can use Delta, but you're not going to get high value for your points. So that's one of the criteria I'm using here, is a domestic partner for an airline that gives you great value. Now, the same thing will be true for hotels. There are a lot of hotel chains. You can transfer points from American Express over to Marriott or over to Hilton. You can do that with Marriott with Chase points as well. But the problem is you're never going to get 2 cents per point, hardly ever with Hilton or with Marriott. Maybe once in a blue moon, you might find a unicorn redemption, but it's just not going to happen consistently. So I'm not going to include those as ones that are the very best as far as transfer partners in this scenario. But there are some that you can. Hyatt is, of course, the one that rises to the top. Hyatt, you can get 2 cent per point redemptions, or at least very close to it, almost across the board, almost always, consistently. Now, there are some others, though. There's choice hotels. Some of the credit card companies, particularly Citi and Wells Fargo, you can transfer your points and you get double the points. So if you transfer 1 point, you get 2 points with choice. And there are a lot of choice hotels in the United States. So if you do that, you can get pretty good value, sometimes right at up to 2 cents per point or maybe a little bit better. There's also I Prefer. They are fantastic. 1 to 4 with Citi. You get 4 points for every 1 Citi point you transfer over. The problem is they don't have a big footprint. So we'll primarily look at Hyatt and choice for that. But that is a criteria that I think is vitally important. Being able to have easy to use domestic transfer partners that give you high value. As I mentioned, the third thing is over 2 cents per point value as a standard. I mean, I just don't want to see people transfer their points over to Hilton and I love Hilton. I mean, we stay in Hiltons, but they don't give good value for your points if you're trying to be able to budget and manage and get the most travel you can for the least amount, because they give you about half a cent per point. Marriott's barely better. IHG, they're not any better at all. So that's why this standard of 2 cents per point to me is where you're really going to win versus the banks, rather than them being very happy with the redemptions that you're making because they're putting money in their pocket. The fourth thing that has to be considered, and I think this one's often overlooked by folks who recommend cards to people who are limited in their travels and know that they've got to travel domestically, and that is award availability. I think that any system, you need to have high award availability. What I mean by that is that on some dates, especially if you're restrictive in when you can go, you will find that, say, United on a particular day will have 35 flights to choose from. Now, some won't be cheap, some won't be good redemption value, but they'll have a lot to choose from. But if you transfer your points over to Avianca, and then you try to use what we talked about before, which is that really difficult way to have to use a foreign airline program to purchase a U.S. carrier, you might have 3 flights available. They don't have the same award availability. So to me, for someone who wants an easy setup for high value, you need to have partners that have lots and lots of availability. And so based upon the ones we talked about before, that is American, lots of availability, United, lots of availability, and also a lot of availability when it comes to Alaska's Atmos program. So with airlines, that's particularly true, because if you transfer your points and try to book a Delta flight with Air France, you're not going to have a lot of availability. Same thing with British Airways trying to book American, or Turkish trying to book United. I think to make it easy and still get good value, you've got to look at availability. That's a basic criteria. And then the last thing is, I think any setup, you have to have really good multipliers. In other words, you have to be able to use your card for your everyday life, your everyday spending, and be able to earn a decent amount of points. Now, I know you'll get some points from sign-up bonuses, but a lot of folks who just want an easy setup, they're not going to be people who are going to be churning 5 or 6 cards a year. They just want to live their life. They just want to get a new card every now and again, maybe, but they don't want to think about it that much. They want to just know, I use this card for this, I use this card for this, I only got 3 cards or whatever it may be. And they can memorize that pretty easy, use it, and then look when they get ready to go on a trip and they've got some points built up and be able to use them easily and still get good value. That's what I'm hoping to describe for you in these upcoming videos. So those are my basic principles. Now, based upon that, this is what it comes out to. As I mentioned before, we're going to look at some issuers that could potentially have some of those good transfer partners that are easy to use, high value, and have good earnings. And it limits it down. There's not going to be any American Express cards in what we're talking about here. Those have high annual fees. They don't really have a good domestic. They have Delta, but it's never going to be high value. And so they're just not going to fit the bill for the criteria that we're looking at here. We're not going to really look at Capital One. Same thing. They don't have any really good domestic transfer partners for high value. No good hotel transfer partners for high value. So the ones we're going to look at are Citibank. We're going to look at Chase. We're going to look at Wells Fargo, just basically for one specific hotel redemption. And then finally, one of the best is Bilt. So those are the 4 that we're going to look at in this series of videos. And then when it comes to airlines, that's American Airlines. We're going to look at United, and we're going to look at the Atmos program for Alaska. You can get great value with those. And we're going to look at just basically 2 hotel programs, Hyatt and Choice. We'll throw in I Prefer, but as I said, very small footprint. But when you do find one, you can get a really good value. So that's where it's going to break down. And like I said, some of those other issuers, I love American Express cards. I love Capital One cards. I love foreign transfer partners. But for people who are not wanting to put a whole lot of effort into it, they're just wanting to have a card set up that's easy to use day by day, but they want to get good value. They want to win against the banks, but they're limited on when they can travel because of their kids or their schedule or whatever it may be, and they're having to watch their budget. That's what these videos are going to be for. So I hope you'll like and subscribe, that you hit the bell notifications when my new videos come out, because I'm going to give you several options of different setups, both individual bank setups, just all Citi, all Chase, stuff like that, and combinations between the two that can give you great potential value according to the criteria we've laid out here. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Consider my channel membership. I give a lot more advice and a lot more tips there. It's just $2.99 a month. You can cancel anytime. I do special release videos just for channel members. I early release my videos for them, and that's all described in the box below. You can check that out. Please hit the like and subscribe, and I will see you here in the next video as we get started down this journey of great redemptions for domestic travel. Thank you.